Privacy and data protection are among the most important considerations in modern workplace investigations. An investigation often requires the collection and review of sensitive information, such as employee statements, emails, chat messages, medical information, or digital records. However, the fact that an employer has a legitimate reason to investigate does not mean that every type of information can be collected or accessed without limitation. Investigators must always balance two competing interests. On one side, the employer has the right and responsibility to investigate workplace concerns, protect the organization, and make informed decisions. On the other side, employees maintain a reasonable expectation that their personal information and private affairs will be treated with respect and protected from unnecessary intrusion. This creates what is often referred to as a balancing test. The investigator must consider whether the organization has a legitimate business reason for collecting the information and whether the method used is reasonable and proportionate. In simple terms, the question is not only, can we obtain this information, but also, should we obtain this information? And is this the least intrusive way to achieve our investigative purpose? Workplace investigators today operate within a wide range of privacy laws, depending on the location, industry, and type of information involved. For example, in the European Union, the General Data Protection Regulation, commonly known as GDPR, establishes strict requirements for handling personal information. It requires that personal data be collected and processed lawfully, fairly, and transparently. It also gives individuals specific rights regarding their personal information and requires organizations to respond appropriately to data breaches. In the United States, investigators may need to consider laws such as H1PAA, which protects individually identifiable health information. This is particularly important when investigations involve medical accommodations, disability information, or substance-related issues, because these records may require a higher level of confidentiality. Another important U.S. law is the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, or ECPA, which provides protection against unauthorized interception or access to electronic communications. This is especially relevant when investigators review emails, messages, or other forms of electronic communication. In Canada, investigators must also consider privacy legislation such as PIPA, PIPEDA, and FIPA. These laws establish rules regarding the collection, use, disclosure, and protection of personal information. Depending on whether the organization operates in the private or public sector, different privacy obligations may apply. Regardless of the specific law involved, there are several core principles that should guide every workplace investigation. The first principle is data minimization. Investigators should collect only the information that is necessary and directly relevant to the investigation. More information does not necessarily create a stronger investigation. Collecting excessive personal information can actually create additional legal risks. The second principle is transparency and informed awareness. Where appropriate, individuals should understand why information is being collected and how it will be used. However, investigators must also recognize that certain situations may allow an organization to collect information without prior consent when it is necessary for a legitimate investigation. The third principle is confidentiality and need-to-know access. Investigation files should not be widely distributed. Access should be limited to individuals who genuinely require the information, such as the investigator, legal counsel, and decision-makers responsible for reviewing the findings. The fourth principle is evidence security. Investigation materials, including interview notes, emails, digital files, and forensic evidence, must be stored securely. These records should be protected through appropriate safeguards, such as restricted access systems, encrypted storage, or secure physical filing methods. The final principle is accuracy. Many privacy frameworks recognize that individuals have the right to ensure that their personal information is accurate. Investigators must therefore distinguish carefully between verified facts, allegations, opinions, and assumptions when creating investigation records. In practice, privacy expectations vary, depending on the type of information or location being examined. For example, workplace searches of desks, lockers, or company property may be permissible when the organization has clear policies explaining that such areas may be subject to inspection. These policies help establish that employees have a reduced expectation of privacy in certain workplace areas. Similarly, employers may generally monitor activity on company-owned systems, such as corporate email or internet usage, if employees have been informed through workplace policies. However, monitoring should still be reasonable and should stop once information is clearly identified as personal and unrelated to the investigation. Video surveillance requires greater caution because it is considered highly intrusive. Cameras must have a legitimate business purpose and should never be placed in areas where employees have a strong expectation of privacy, such as washrooms or changing areas. Investigations involving personal devices, often referred to as bring your own device or BYOD situations, create additional challenges. Personal phones and computers may contain a mixture of work-related and private information. Employers generally cannot assume they have unlimited authority to search personal devices. Consent, legal authority, and applicable policies must be carefully considered before accessing this type of information. Failing to respect privacy obligations can expose an organization and the investigator to significant liability. One potential legal risk is known as intrusion upon seclusion. This occurs when someone intentionally invades another person's private affairs without proper justification, and the intrusion would be considered highly offensive by a reasonable person. For investigators, this means avoiding unnecessary searches, collecting information simply because it is available, or conducting broad fishing expeditions without a clear investigative purpose. The objective is not to collect everything possible, but to collect the right information in a fair, reasonable, and defensible manner. Ultimately, protecting privacy is not an obstacle to effective investigations. Rather, it is a key element of professional investigation practice. A well-managed investigation respects individual privacy, while ensuring that the organization can still uncover facts, make fair decisions, and maintain workplace integrity.